YA nerds, it's Reading Rue again. Welcome to another installment of the show. Today I'm going to be talking about this book called The Girl in Between. There's actually two books with this title. Today I'm talking about the one by Laekan Kemp. I really hope I'm pronouncing her name right. I could be wrong, but I think that's how it's pronounced. This book's actually a digital-only book. It's free right now on Kindle, I think. The first one, yeah, the first book's free, the second book's a couple dollars more. It's 289 pages, and it was published in September 2014. I know that's kind of old in terms of YA. There are a ton of other really good books out right now, but I wanted to talk about it. It was recommended to me by a friend, so we're talking about it right now. Hi Amy, if you're watching. This is the book that she recommended to me almost a year ago, so I picked it up. So, here is the plot from Goodreads as usual. I'm going to read it to you guys. Bryn Reyes is a real-life sleeping beauty. Afflicted with Klein-Levin syndrome, she suffers episodes of prolonged sleep that steal weeks and sometimes even months from her life. But unlike most KLS patients, she doesn't spend each episode in a catatonic state or wake up with no recollection of the time she's missed. Instead, Bryn spends half her life in an alternate reality made up of her memories. For Bryn, the past is a place until one day, a boy she's never met before washes up on the illusory beach of her dreams with no memory of who he is. But the appearance of this strange boy isn't the only thing that's changed. Bryn's symptoms are worsening. Her body is weakening as she's plagued by hallucinations even while awake. Her only hope of finding a cure is to undergo experimental treatment created by a German specialist. But when Dr. Bands reveals that he knows more about her strange symptoms than he originally let on, Bryn learns that the boy in her head might actually be the key to understanding what's happening to her. And worse, that if she doesn't find out his identity before it's too late, they both might not survive. Pretty interesting, heavy stuff. So again, this book was recommended to me by a really close friend. Hi Amy! And it feels like a true YA book in that it's set up and its overall writing style. It's a relatively unknown book. I've never heard of it before, you know, a year ago. I'm pretty sure it's still free on Kindle. Go check it out. Free books I feel like are worth it because you don't pay for them and usually get thrown into this wonderful world. That's great. Let me explain though something about this book. It's kind of really poorly written. I hate to sound that way. By that I mean, you know, there are certain parts in the story where things are happening that completely drag me out of the action. Like for instance, Bryn and the boy, whose name I know but I won't reveal it because it's a big plot thing in the book. But Bryn and the mystery boy are like sitting on a porch at one point in her dream world. And then all of a sudden they're like in a field. And by that I mean it's literally like one sentence to the next. And I understand that we're in, well, that was a really, I understand that we're in a dream world. I totally get that. But I feel like there needs to be some kind of exposition or explanation how you get from point A to point B. You can't just explain it away by being like, we're in a dream world, so things just happen this way, and things flash from one place that, it doesn't make sense. So like, every time that happened, I would be like, wait. Like, weren't we just on the porch? And I'd go back up a couple of rows and be like, yeah, we were just on the porch. What are we talking about flowers now? How are we talking about a forest now? What are we talking about the beach? What do you mean? So that's my biggest gripe with the book. It happened a lot. It happened so much that this book took me a really long time to get through. Usually I can read a YA book if I'm super into it in like 3 or 4 days. I work 2 jobs, so I'm busy. But this book took me almost 2 weeks to finish because I kept dragging myself out of there and I was like, like, why do you keep doing this to me? You know, and like I said, I understand that the dreamscape is a fluid place, but it doesn't work in a book when you do it that way. You lose the reader. Also, you know, it's not really a gripe, but they do drop the F-bomb a lot in this book. And I mean, you know, don't get me wrong, I curse like a sailor. I do. I'm the worst with that stuff. I have such a hard time controlling my mouth. Obviously, I try very hard when I'm making these videos because I want them to be viewable and accessible to everyone without offending or whatever. It just got to the point where it really felt excessive. I understand that teenagers curse a lot too. Believe me, I have a teenage sister, and the amount of words out of her mouth, the amount of words out of my mouth at that age, you know, I get it, but it just felt like it was too much. And then there was the ending of the book. Nothing annoys me more than when a book ends and it leaves things open-ended for a sequel. Like, I love sequels. I love series. I love things that are multiple books because when I'm immersed in a world and I love that world, I want to be immersed in that world for a long time. That's why I really like Cassandra Clare's Shadowhunter series, because it's like 13 books long and I can read all 13 books in a row and love it and be like excited and whatever. I think I read the Mortal Instruments, all 6 books, in like a month. I read, or like a month and a half, 2 months, something like that. I read the Game of Thrones series in a month, but again, it was one of those things like I couldn't put it down, and I love jumping from one book to the next to the next to the next. But in this one, I feel like the way it ended, it was like, oh, it's ended, but here's your sequel. Like, it's ended, and now you have to buy the next book. And the next book isn't free, which I understand, that's a smart, like, marketing ploy. The next book is $3. But, like, it's turned me off completely. It has. I'm not even going to read the rest of the series. I'm done. I'm done with this book. A huge cliffhanger like the one we're left with, and almost nothing explained by the end of the first book, makes me a mad roo. Usually I'd be thrilled at the aspect of this whole thing, but I'm just exhausted. My complaints may seem like really unfair, but I actually saw, as I was researching this book on Goodreads, I saw a couple of other people say the exact same thing. So, you know, granted, there are some enjoyable things about the book. Pick it up because it's free. But, you know, the concept is incredibly interesting. I've never heard of KLS before I read this book. And, you know, Bryn's whole dreamscape thing is really interesting. The world she's created for herself is fascinating, but I don't think it's worth it. That's just me. I'm burned by it. But again, that's just how I feel. It's my opinion, and opinions aren't truth. If you love the book, awesome. I'm glad you loved the book. I just had such a hard time with it. I really did. For tropes, we have, again, these are tropes that I've made up or found on the internet or come up with my other YA friends and librarians who have given me like their ideas and their lists, and these are just things that I've come up with when it comes to YA lit. If you don't know what any of them mean, check out the description below. I list my definitions and the words that I'm using down there. Eventually I think I'll release like a whole list and you guys can look at it. For now, here's the tropes for this book. So we have green eyes, love cures all, no school, screw math, Mr. Tall, Dark, and Perfect, only one friend in the world, unusual names, straight as an arrow, love at first sight, and undiscovered powers. For my rating of the book, I'm giving it a 4 out of 10. I'm not gonna read again, probably. Not even gonna read the next one. And it was really hard for me to pick a favorite part too. Yeah, the book really didn't do well for me. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, author, whose name I can't pronounce, Miss Kemp. I feel really terrible saying that. I really do, but I never in my life have I rated a book so poorly. It could have been much better. You could have had it all. Rolling in the deep. My favorite part, it was hard to pick because I had such a hard time with this book, but it's this part where we find out the boy's name and he and Bryn start to fall for each other and they start to spend a lot of time together in this dreamscape world, which was great. Any time in the dreamscape world was amazing for me, honestly, as much as I gripe about this book. So I'll read it to you. It is also, I keep doing that trope, switching point of views as well. I keep forgetting that. Yeah, let me do that again. For tropes, oh no, because I'm gonna do that. So my favorite part is, I'm gonna read it, ready? The way Bryn talked about her disease made it seem like some kind of possession rather than just a long nap. And it made me wonder if she thought the worst because she was here, not there, not really living it. Sometimes the things we imagine are worse than the real thing, right? Like, whatever bad memories might have been lurking in the deep recesses of my brain. They could have been bad. My parents getting divorced, my grandmother's funeral, getting into a fight at school. Or they could have been really bad. The worst. I tried not to think about all the things that might be waiting for me. Bad things. I might have given anything to forget. Things that had left a mark so deep it took drowning to finally scrape myself clean. But then I reminded myself that that wasn't all it had taken. It took my memories, all of them, the good and the bad, my entire identity, because don't you need both? People don't exist in just light and dark. They exist in the contrast, in the shadows, where the two overlap. So even though I was afraid of what I'd find, I knew I'd never be myself again without all of it, the entire truth of me. The rain suddenly sputtered out all at once, sunlight tearing through the clouds. So, that's my favorite part. I do like the way the author, Laekan, I'm sorry if I'm butchering her name, I do like the way that she does describe things like this. There are a couple of run-on sentences, at least there was one when I was reading that one just now. It doesn't sound like that when you're reading it out loud, but when you're reading it and you're like, wait a minute. So, she writes very poetically. So, you know, that is the good aspect about this book. It's very poetic reading. For the age range, I'm gonna say 14, 15, 16. There's some mention of sex. There's a suicide mention, which is kind of a big thing in there. And there's like a sexual assault situation between Bryn and her ex-boyfriend, which she dwells on every once in a while. It kind of sounds like when she's talking about it that she's got PTSD about it. So it's kind of fascinating. She's like a survivor in that way, but she doesn't want to call it what it is. She just keeps saying like, oh, he hurt me, he hurt me, he hurt me. And, you know, it's just good to have that conversation with your teen that's going to read this, you know, that this thing happened to this character and it's not okay what her boyfriend did. And, you know, even though he's sorry and whatever, it doesn't excuse it. And the fact she spends a lot of the book going back and forth about whether she's going to be with him or not, because they're the kind of couple that breaks up every 2 months and then gets back together. And so she spends a ton of time like, do I want to get back together with him or do I want to be with Dream Boy? And then it was a little sloppy, but the way that Laekan did it was that, you know, she kind of made it like, well, he's hurt me, so I shouldn't want to get back together with him, and I only get back together with him because it's easy, and he's familiar, and he knows about my disease, KLS, Klein-Levin syndrome, and he is always there, you know, when I wake up. Like, I'm the one, Bryn blames herself a lot throughout the series. I'm the one who leaves people because I fall asleep for weeks at a time, so I can't blame him for the way he behaves towards me, which is BS, in my opinion. So that's why I think 14, 15, 16 could read that kind of thing. Because honestly, at that time too, like, kids can be garbage. They really can. I've said it before, I have a teenage sister, and she's already dated, you know, a couple people, and I remember one boy decided, like, I'm just gonna date this other girl to make you jealous. And she was basically like, no you're not. Because if you're gonna date someone while we're dating to make me jealous, then we're just gonna be broken up and that's gonna do nothing for you. And I remember, like, being so proud of my sister when she did this, because it's not like I was like, you should tell him this. She did it on her own. So I feel like reading a book like this, especially when you're in your mid-teens, is great information, because That is the one thing that we learned from Bryn. Don't go back to the jackass. I'm sorry, I cursed. Don't go back to him, because just because it's easy doesn't mean it's right. So, there you go. That's the story. That's the girl in between. Read it if you want. Maybe you'll like it. Maybe I'm wrong. This is all just my opinion, and you know, opinions aren't fact. So, anyway, if you like what you're seeing, I know this was a big complaining episode. Oh my god, I've never had one of those. Make sure you subscribe down below. I update every other Thursday, and I guess I'll see you around, YA nerds. Enjoy your reading.